Your Eminences, fathers, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to participate in this conference. I was very interested by its topic, and we see that this actually coincided with this phenomenon that I'm going to talk about. And although I strongly support the themes put here, I find the conservative language used a bit worrying. I wonder whether we can put across the message to the young people who are the vectors of the work culture. So I undertook this study wanting to have in Greek literature a reference that is not simply a rehashing of a translation from a foreign site, not to have been written by institutions that only see the landscape of threat due to violence inherent in such groups, like the one I'm studying, or, on the other hand, actors who use them as an example of social justice violations. With this presentation, I wanted to understand them and to explain what drives them to this nihilistic view of life, even though they're in their prime. The acronym Incels is derived from the initial syllables of the English words involuntary celibates. The term incels, according to the protocol drawn up on behalf of the European Union, refers to men who believe that they are genetically and socially disadvantaged in such a way that they have no access to sexual relations with women. Their online ecosystem contains hate messages against women, with their community endorsing violence against women, and members who have carried out murders and being called heroes. Well, I decided not to actually show pictures because a lot of the images will, in fact, make you very emotionally charged. So we see that the European Commission saw the risk and requested a study on this phenomena. The data was collected by the largest the largest English-speaking online community, and we see that most members are in Germany, UK, Sweden, and Italy. I don't know if the young man who declared himself to be an incel is one of the 16 people that we see living in Greece on the basis of the EU graph, but I can say without a doubt that we have a lot of femicides in Greece, unfortunately, for a country of such a small size. We see that in the States, in March of 2020, we had the age group of 18 to 30. Well, the users of Google that looked for terms that were associated with the ideology were between 18 and 24 years of age. It was a community that was created online, and we see that this has also shaped its existence. And we see that the individuals meet there expressing their outrage, anger and pain as a result of their inability to have sexual relations and feel that they that they're well endowed. Incels have developed their own ideology and values and have created their own terminology. They have, in fact, young children entering this community, and the search looks maxing elements, ways to improve their external image through physiognomic changes, plastic surgery, and the use of steroids. There is initially a support group in which members help each other, and then they are immersed in a nihilistic way of thinking where they feel that they find the only truth. Their ideology denies personality as a factor of connection and emotional contact as important elements. The dehumanization of women is a common reference point for them. So we see that it was, in fact, violence that they're driven to that made the European Commission become alerted to this matter and commission a study. So what might a postmodern young person declaring himself as incel have in mind? He has a worldview that fits this community, but I would like to say something that might appear arbitrary, and I would like to compare an incel with a monk. So this was the discussion. This was the result of a discussion I had with people who were flirting with this ideology, and they'd simply heard about monks and monasticism. We're using this comparison for two reasons: to contrast a group that is familiar to the conference audience in order to mitigate the negative feeling that we might have towards incels, but also to show that abstinence from sexual acts does not imply inferiority. We have incels that is an online community, whilst monks belong to a monastery. The first state that they're celibate on an involuntary basis, whilst the second do it on a voluntary basis. The first feel rejected by society, whilst the others deny society, turn their back on it perhaps. The first have a hate terminology, while the others have a terminology of love. So the first cannot be perceived by what they wear, the third by the cassock that they wear. The one are in fact looking for external improvement, while the others for internal improvement. When I first talked about this list, I had a commentator who said that monks may appear to deny the society, but in fact they seek true communion with God and their fellow men and women and have a deep love of the world. So I think this arbitrary comparison draws attention away from the problem of incel, that there is a genetic inferiority that defines them as unfit for sexual relations. It thus demonstrates the falsehood on which this view is based, since there are other groups who deliberately have this trait. But we see that control within the incel groups is exercised based on idiosyncratic perceptions, and they seem to be trapped in their belief system. Nurtured by the culture of awakening, woke culture in other words, since childhood, they are part of postmodern youth, and they found that incel ideology natural. Elements of the woke culture in which they grew up and were raised, the desanctification of the body and the absolute separation of body and soul, the substitution of the concept of the soul for the inner self, which may be different from the outer self, where we see that great priority is given to the external part of the body, which can be completely variable. What I feel is who I am, and if it doesn't match my body, then I can change my body. Emotion is a criteria for decision making. The promotion of experience is something so powerful that it can supplant the intellect, the relativization of truth, the deep skepticism with respect to any claim of truth, the hopeless, simplistic and dangerous view where everything is a problem in which the weak have to fight their oppressors, the modern sense of self, whereby individuals seek extreme ideologies where even violence is permissible. Taking the above into consideration, a young person who feels an innate and natural, intense and demanding need for companionship, communication, understanding and love, does what he has learned. He turns against what he does not have. The culture of awakening does indeed create a lack of characteristics. So it is often impossible for the young child to relate to a person genuinely in a relationship. But when the mindset he has grown up with is that it is always someone else's fault, parents, teachers, women, governments, some defective genes, there's no need to regret a mistake that you made as long as you find a woke lawyer. That role in this case is taken up by the online community. The need for a deeper view of things led me, on the occasion of this conference, to a discussion with a psychiatrist and psychologist in this matter. And so I actually spoke with a child psychiatrist and psychotherapist, Mr. Dimitris Karagiannis. I thank him, and I'm pleased to be able to present some of the conclusions that I drew from our discussion. Mr. Karagiannis explained that these groups were created online and are growing there because sometimes the digital self is better than the real one. By creating online heroes with dynamic characteristics, young people do not realize that they are dead. People are dehumanized if they only exist online. It is important to note that incels call themselves that. They feel that the term denotes their situation, and they subscribe to their forums and online groups, and they prefer to actually designate themselves as such rather than to express their pain, sadness, fear, guilt, spiritual, existential anxiety. Social pain is rooted in relationships. For every sufferer, there is the possibility for an ever-expanding circle, social network, or community of those who are given the opportunity to act as witnesses to that person's unique suffering, to help with them, to offer support, or unfortunately to amplify their pain. This presentation can be an introduction to listening more carefully to the suffering of many young people today, an attempt to put ourselves in their shoes. In the second stage comes identification, to experience the state of mind as our own, as if we live in the same era and have common stimuli. The third stage is empathy, having recovered a sense of self to stand by the other person. This is how we see the Dr. Mata's book describe it. By describing the way they think, the Incels demonstrate how difficult it is to live without being able to recognize the beauty of one's inner world, without being able to hope, seek, and experience the divine attributes that lead one to seek God's love. The despair in front of the mirror, which leads to plastic surgery and other extreme deformities, speaks of a repulsive knowledge of self that is indeed covered by and full of hypocrisy and narcissism, intensifying frustration and leading to despair. As if the mental numbness we feel when we approach these extreme but real attitudes is intense, we should think as Holocaust survivors, those who embrace, adopt, but ultimately manage to survive the abyss of the culture of awakening. Perhaps we could also talk about the need for palliative care, which would pertain to young people who are perhaps intellectually dead, even though they appear to be sound of body.